Look what happened now.
Oh, you got the inner light you have.
It's the inner temple.
Go. Welcome to the Conscious Experience. My name is Boris, and I'm here today with my dear friend Mike. Mike, how are you, brother? I'm feeling great. This is the topic that I love talking about. We're going to have like hundreds of episodes around this specific thing. So I'm excited to kick this one off. Religion versus spirituality. How are you
Beautiful.
doing?
I'm super excited. I love this topic. We've had some requests for this topic, and yeah, I'm excited to tackle it. And this may not be the first, not may not be the last time we approach this, because there's so many angles. It's such a rich topic.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, let's get started. Like we normally do, let's start off with some definitions. So let's start with what is religion? What do you think religion is, Boris?
I think so. Religion, in the word, like the meaning of the word itself, is it means to bind together. It comes from the same word as ligament. So ligament, religion, to bind together again. Okay, so I think that is the essence and the core of what religion is. But I think what religion is in practice these days is basically a form of ritual, a kind of, and primarily I almost feel like it's more of a secular, more like a community kind of ritual, where we do the same thing and we just feel like, we are a community, we are together.
Nice. Yeah, I've never actually heard of that. So thank you for sharing that. I didn't know religion meant similar to like yoga, to unite or bind. So that makes sense. That's amazing. Yeah, I think at a surface level, religion can be seen as like an organization of beliefs or worldviews, typically creating a certain storyline with a history. Also, religion has a lot of history, and typically around like a leader, whether it's like Moses or Jesus or something like that. And most people in a religion learn from that specific leader. So, and yeah, not to mention like all the different sects and orders. So Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhism, all the different world religions. So yeah, that's my definition of religion. And typically it has some sort of moral or some sort of religious rules to follow. So some sort of structure. Yeah.
And I also would say, like, in the space of definition, let's talk about like the source of religion, right? Because the origin of both, I think, really deeply contributes to the actual definition and what it is. And I really want to kind of like have this topic be something that we can deeply engage in, like there's a practical insight that really comes from our discussion here. So like in religion, the source is typically one who knows, right? It's typically either it's a book that's written by somebody, or it's a person, it's a persona, and we're basically referencing outside of ourselves. There was this origin, there was this person who said, "This is the way," or "I am the way," and then the rest of the people were like, "Yeah, this is good." So we are going to follow the way that the wise ones before us had laid out. We don't necessarily know why or how, or like what it is that we're really doing, but we trust that we are being led in a way that is wholesome. So yeah, with religion, the origin is primarily external. It's that it comes to us as an individual. It comes to us either through our parents or our culture, or just our sense of like, discovery and exploration in the world.
Amazing. And I can see this already crossing some lines. So let's start to define, before we move on, what is spirituality? And we can kind of contrast the two. So what do you think that is spirituality? And then we'll talk about the differences between them.
Yeah, spirituality, the way that we kind of are talking about it here, is more of like, so we say religion's coming from the outside in, and we're learning the rules and things like this. The idea behind spirituality is this inside out. I feel that when a person kind of identifies themselves as spiritual or has a spiritual practice, they are looking not necessarily for, and of course, yeah, I mean, this happens too, but they're not necessarily looking for external validation or to meet an external rule. They're instead wanting to find various techniques, various ways of understanding and insight to unlock, to release, to discover, to express something that they have a sense is within them. So this is, I would say, so spirituality is not so much following an external ritual, although it may have rituals in there, but we're not doing it necessarily to please an external deity or to conform to particular rules. But rather, we are looking for something to open up a way so that, as Robert Browning would say, to release the imprisoned splendor, to release something, some kind of a greatness that we feel is within us.
Nice. I agree with that 100%. And also, just to maybe a simpler definition that I would say is spirituality is essentially just a connection to God. So if we were to look at, I guess, like, are those called Venn diagrams where there's like circles and stuff? Circles? Yeah.
Yeah, the circles that overlap.
Yeah. So I would say, and maybe you can see otherwise, but spirituality is the full circle, and religion would be like a subset of spirituality. So you can have multiple religions within the context of a spiritual connection to God.
Yeah. And I feel like all religion is born of spirituality, right? It is born of an individual who is practicing, let's say, spirituality. And spirituality, yeah, you're right. So the whole core of spiritual practice is the realization of oneness. It's the realization that God and I and my Father are one, right? So it is always born of this spiritual insight, whether it comes from Jesus or Buddha. Somebody has this transcendent, sometimes a moment or transcendent, embodiment of being, and speaks, in these ways. And then the people who are, instead of following really in that same way and being Jesus and being like God, being like Krishna, like Buddha, they instead pay homage to Buddha, to Krishna, to Jesus, and say, you know what, I will listen to you, but not necessarily be like you. So this is where I kind of also see like some of that contrast beginning to emerge between spirituality and religion.
Yeah, I think most people know, even in religion, that Jesus and Buddha, or these great masters, were not religious per se. They did not have any intent to start cults or anything of organized structure. They were just merely sharing what their experience with God was. So yeah, that's very interesting.
But many of them were part of religions, right?
Oh, okay.
We have also like Buddha was a Hindu. Jesus was a Jew, right? Many people that have this awakening, and did they have it through religion? That's also a potent, I think, discussion. But typically they have, and perhaps it is the fruitage even of religion. And then this one who is expressed as the fruit of that religion somehow, becomes a law in itself, becomes a way in itself, and then perhaps becomes another religion built around them.
Yeah. So when I was studying the world religions, I think I've been on this path. Just some backstory. So I was never raised religious at all, found meditation at the age of like 20 or 21 years old, and then found my own definition of God through the practice of meditation. And then since then, for the last 14 years, I've been studying world religion. And I think you've been on a similar path as well. So one of the things when I first started studying religions was just realizing that there was really, I saw them as two separate worldviews. One was like the Judeo-Christian religion, so Christianity, Catholicism, Muslim. The other one were the Eastern religions, so Buddhism, Hinduism, Tantra, all that stuff, Sufism. And so on the Judeo-Christian side, you had the idea that God is the one. He's like the one that we worship. And then on the Eastern side, you had the idea that God is one. So instead of the one, God is just one. So regardless if he's the one or one, what we're basically looking at is an omnipresent. Is it omnipresent or omnipotent? Both?
Omnipresent means it's present everywhere, which means that there is no room for another. And omnipotent means it is the all power, the only power, which means there is no room for another.
Right. And yeah, so that question set me on a path to figure out what that actually means. Like in my own experience, if everything is one, which is what the world religions are saying, then why do I experience two? Why do I experience Boris over there and Mike over here? Right? Because I think this has to be deeply personally relatable if we're to find any connection to God. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you're sharing about something. So like, I think that this is also a big part of the definition. Both religion and spirituality are attempts to reach God, attempts to discover what the truth is. One is very structured and safe. It's safe in the sense that you have agreement, you have people who follow the same, you will always find community, you will always have people say, yes, you are right, oh, you're such a good Christian, such a good Jew, such a good Muslim or whatever. And on the other side, you also have a path, but sometimes those paths are more individual. There's still groups, of course, in spirituality, we still come together, but it's not so organized. It's not so that somebody says, well, you're a good spiritual, aspirant or something like this. It's a much more inwardly focused path. And I also want to just echo like what you were saying. The Judeo-Christian religions look at the aspect of God that is the transcendent God, whereas the Eastern religions primarily look at God as the immanent God. But God is both transcendent and immanent. So they're essentially, just emphasizing different aspects of the same whole.
Yeah, and I do want to say that everything we say is quite paradoxical. Nothing should be taken as truth, almost like a financial disclaimer. This is not, these are just based on our experiences. So yeah, that's interesting. So, and this is maybe generalizing, and I know within religion, you have people that find a deeper connection to their spirituality, obviously different levels to this. But just to generalize, I would say the religious people that I've seen more so believe that, the saying, as above, so below.
Yes.
Well, theirs is more so like as above, not so below, which means that God is sometimes more powerful than whatever we could be possibly, which is a very humble way to look at God, which I think is beautiful. But it also can create a fear-bearing God as opposed to like a friendly God. And then I would say like in the Eastern traditions, as above, so below definitely applies. So they're trying to find the qualities of God that reside also within, which again, in its dark side can create a very narcissistic kind of view of life.
Yeah. So we're kind of like exploring this religion and spirituality. And I also want to introduce like an angle here of like God versus religion and spirituality, because God is neither, right? We're talking about these human intentions, these good intentions towards, reaching this ultimate, but to the ultimate, it's, then this is kind of like a little bit of a deeper and perhaps juicier discussion. It's like God is not found in religion, and neither is it in spirituality. It's in fact something that is, it's almost like we have this in spiritual circles a lot. It's like fish is inside of the water and it's looking for the water. It's like, where is it? How can I ever find it? And so both to a certain degree miss the point, because both start with the assumption that it is not here, that I am not already in it, that God is somewhere that can be reached through meditation, through prayer, through ritual, through ceremony, through whatever. And finally, I will accrue enough points, I will accrue enough positive karma, enough grace, enough forgiveness that I will at last know him, that I will at last know the truth.
Yeah, this is perfect. I'm going to ask you a question that flows pretty nicely into this, which is, what do you think causes people to seek religion or spirituality? And specifically, I guess we can separate this into non-religious people seeking religion or spirituality, and then also, let's say, religious people moving away from religion to spirituality. So you can take this however you want. What do you think causes people to seek God or spirituality or religion?
To be honest, I think it's suffering, some form of suffering. There is not anybody that I can imagine that is like blissed out, like, just like laying in this and basking in this bliss and joy. And they're like, oh, I need to find God. No. It typically is like deep in the dumps of like suffering and pain and misunderstanding and like, wow, so much what people are dying. My family is, dissolving, all of this. I'm at a loss. God, are you real? Are you out there? And that, I mean, that's one extreme, but it's some form of that, or it's just a sense of unsettlement, like, oh, like something doesn't feel right. I don't feel complete. I want to, and I think the core of it is like, I feel alone. I feel alone. I feel lonely. I feel incomplete. And that is, I think, is a very strong kind of soul impulse. It's like, I feel incomplete in what I perceive as myself and the world that I live, which is impossible really in this world to feel complete, because this world has time, and we have this, so long as we have a sense that I do live in a world with time, I'm always coming from a past and always trying to basically overcome the past in my future, and that is never ending. And so we're seeking completion. And then I feel like this is where spirituality catches people's attention, religion catches people's attention, and they say, well, maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe somebody else knows. So I want to find this help. I want to find guidance.
Yeah, it's almost like this universe was inherently built for us to find God. As the world of matter kind of dissolves and fades away, everything that we're holding on to, friends, family, people die, all this stuff, and we inherently try to seek this stability beyond space and time. So interesting. Yeah, it can also like awaken through some sort of psychedelic use, was a very common thing in the West, especially. Like, I think I read a stat, I don't know how true this is, like 95% of all Western Buddhists found Buddhism through some sort of psychedelic experience. But I think you're right. Just like extremes of suffering or death, breakup, mostly pain, all that stuff causes you to seek it. And I would also say like the transition from religious people to either find a new religion or a new definition of God, or just cancel labeling themselves as religious into more of like a spiritual generic sense, would be the betrayal of God, or feeling like God, the external God of some sort, has now left them. So like that, again, similar suffering. So the end of a marriage, where it's like, God, you took care of me for so long, and now what happened? This was not in my plans, right? Something extreme. So
yes. Yeah, this is really good. It's like these paths, they are offering us some sense of promise that is perhaps beyond what we experience, beyond what we know. And so we kind of start on our way to pursue them. But many times I would say also, on the spiritual path and the religious path, many times we also come empty-handed, and we kind of discover like, oh my God, I can't find it. It's not like, I'm trying to find it here, I'm trying to find it there, and I'm not feeling that sense of completion. Right?
Yeah. Do you think being raised religious versus spiritual versus no concept of God or spirituality, do you think there's a right or a wrong way to raise a child? And if or like, what do you think are the pros and cons maybe of each?
Yeah. I think it's inevitable that we will raise our children in alignment with what we feel is the truth. And, for religious people, for the most part, I think, and the thing is with religion, it is a very strong program, right? Like, we can also really take a moment to appreciate the dark sides of both, right? Yeah. The dark side of religion is control, essentially pillaging and domination. It's like, imagine that the ego suddenly, like anybody's ego, suddenly has this way of being able to say, you know what, God told me that this is what you should do. God told me that this is the right way to get into heaven. And if we look, for example, at something like the Roman Catholic Church, where it's at its inception, it's like, we had the Council of Nicaea in like about 300 years before this current age, AD. And in that space, like the powers of the time gathered and say, okay, what are we going to decide that is the truth? And they edited the Bible in tremendous way. There used to be many, many more books apparently in the Bible, and they just created something that is a document that supports that that intention, let's say, of the people who are in power. So on a grand scale, it's like this power grab. It's like, yeah, pay money to the church, do exactly as we say. Oh, but we get to decide, because we are the ministers of God. We get to decide whether you go into heaven or not, right? And people, I think at the very inception of these, people are very simple. Like I feel like that back in the day, probably people used to trust a lot more, to have a more innocent sense of like, okay, well, maybe it's like this, reminds me of that movie, Liar. How did it go? There's basically a movie where it's like, in a world where nobody ever lies, is the first person who's like, what if I say something else? And he starts like just completely upsetting the matrix, right? So we have that dark side of religion, in the sense of it's, is it true, or does the ego really, the human ego, the human sense of the need for power and status and affirmation, does it come in also and say, oh, you know what, I can now speak on behalf of God because I am a clergyman or whoever I am, a priest, a pope, whatever I may be. And then on the other side, of course, we have spirituality, and the dark side of spirituality is this incredible rabbit hole into, guess what? The same thing, looking for control, right? It's like you go into spirituality and you're like, well, my life is in shambles, so I'm going to go in spirituality. I'm going to figure out how to control. I'm going to figure out how to manifest. I'm going to get the life I want. Many of these initial outreaches towards religion or spirituality start from a place of lack, from a place of like, I'm out of control. I'm going to get control because I'm going to pray to the right God finally, or I'm going to learn the powers, the cities, the psychic abilities, or the whatever secrets to be able to control my life and get a better human condition. I believe that in both of these kind of approaches, it's like people are looking for a better humanhood, and not necessarily in the beginning looking to transcend humanhood and to discover what is the truth of who and what we are.
Nice. Yeah, I can only speak on my own experience. Again, I was not raised religious at all. Boris, were you?
No, not like, so I grew up in the Soviet Union, and there was really, the religion was deeply suppressed. There was certainly religion around me, and there's some, bits, but I was never raised in the church or in a mosque or in any kind of like synagogue or anything.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to speak in generalizations because of my very limited, ignorant experience of watching children being raised religious. But I remember being in India, in the ashrams, in the temples, where in the very early mornings, there's just like hundreds of little children listening to the religious speeches. And most of them are just falling asleep or doing their own thing, like trying to play, and not really paying that much attention. And I've also heard a lot of people growing up in Catholic church or some sort of church, and just not really being that connected or interested in what that person had to say. And I think for the most part, children, again, generalizing, because I know that some people that were raised in church have followed a strong path of God, which is nice. But yeah, overall, I think children just want to play. And there's this idea of play being like the highest form of your connection to God, like this creative, innocent essence, wonder, play, not following structure or whatever. Yeah. So I personally would not raise my children religious, or at least one religion. I'd educate them on all of them, and not really push any form of connection to God, to be honest, early on. I think that's something that they have to find through, like we talked about, suffering.
Yeah. So let me kind of explore this, because I'm also coming close to parenthood, and I really feel that is a consciousness arising. In my sense, like I would want to equip my child with the best that I know of truth. Because if we really look at it, religion, spirituality, and even science is this approach to like, what is the truth? And some very basic truths are, you're experiencing a thought right now. You're experiencing a limited perception of actually an infinite perfection. So we start to really say like that the trouble is not with the world or with reality or something you need to control. The only thing that could ever happen to you is that you think a way that hurts, and to try to, I think on a very basic level, it's like we never really talk, at least, in the previous generations, we don't talk to our children about navigating what to do in the mind. what to do in the emotions. We're only like looking at the body and like, do this, do that, be this way, how you feel, what you think. We don't, there's very little attention on that. So I think that, about raising children so that they can have perhaps maybe like an easier approach to God, a closer approach to God, I would kind of focus on not necessarily creating dogma, but sharing from my experience, like what are the truths, what are the principles that I've discovered? Like even principles very simple, like what's in the way is the way, right? There's some obstacle. Religion would say, pray to Jesus to smite that obstacle. Spirituality would say, oh, let's accept it, or let's manifest something else. Let's just ignore this reality and let's put our attention, but here's another way, in my personal experience, you just look at what it is and you realize that it's actually a gift. What's in the way is the way. It is something that's here to evolve you, to unlock you, to help to bring more greatness, more power, more ability from within you. So I think that this is the space, is like to really not necessarily just to take a jumble and say, okay, you go to, now you're a Catholic, you're a spiritual, or you're whatever, but instead to really see what are the things that actually brought fruitage? What are the things that really made a difference, that really make sense to me on a practical lived level, and to be able to impart to the best of our ability that to our children.
Nice. I love it. All right. Spoken from two people who have no children, but we're trying our best.
I'm excited for our sessions down the line when we do have children.
Yeah, we'll just let them speak.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go in like different directions because we've covered a bunch of stuff. But I'm curious, Boris, what are your thoughts on like the idea of like you have the Hindu side, which has 108 gods or 108 million gods, literally infinite ways to create your own connection to God, versus like the, let's say, Christian ideal of the Lord of Lords, which is just one highest power, let's say. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just to contextualize this entire journey, I think that there are essentially levels of consciousness, and to different levels here, to each level, there's a different world. It's almost like a TV channel, and you go into that channel, and let's just use news, for example, like you watch CNN, boom, you see a world through the eyes of CNN, and you're like, oh, Republicans are bad, Democrats are good. Or you go watch Fox and it's like, oh, Republicans are good, Democrats are bad. And you're seeing everything in light of that. So I really feel, but you cannot take somebody, from this duality who believes very strongly in this, and this makes sense to them, this feels like home, and then say, actually, neither one of those are true or right. And it's like, no, that doesn't compute. No, this is some kind of rhetoric. This is a cliche. This is so it just doesn't make sense. So I think at a certain level, when people just feel like, yes, there are deities, and I would like to pray to them, and I want to pray to like Ganesh because I want him to remove obstacles, or I want to pray to Lakshmi because I need, more money. It gives them what they need. And I think that this is the overall context of consciousness as a whole, is that consciousness is purely responsive, and to whatever is the person's particular level or experience, it responds in kind. And so to the one that needs many gods, there's an opportunity for that. To the one that needs, Brahman, the absolute, there's opportunity for that. And to the one that needs rituals and various forms of like magic, well, there's that appearance as well.
Yeah, nice. Good answer. Approved.
What about you?
Yeah, no, I like them all. I'm friends with all the gods. I think I think gods are just imagination, like you're saying. If you can connect to it strongly enough, and it benefits your life, I think that worldview is a good thing. Now, leading to that, I'm curious, since we are quite well read and studied and experienced, I would say, in many different forms of religion, what for you maybe turned you off from certain religions, if anything? And then I'll also share my experience and see if it kicks anything off. So for example, when I was trying to find what this experience of God that I had was through studying religion, I obviously studied Christianity, Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism. And I would find the deeper I went within myself and my connection to God, I would get these questions coming, these deeper life questions, like what is death? What is the purpose of life? All that stuff. And I found certain religions just, I was not able to find the answer, like through their text or whatever it is, through a leader in that faith. And I'll give you an example. So for example, Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, all the Judeo-Christian religions, I just didn't grasp the idea of there being another power equal or slightly lesser than God, which is the devil or evil. And that was something that God did not create. I just never really grasped with me. And I used to remember asking people of this faith, why is there now this non-loving side of God? And did he create that? And for what purpose? And that always stumped me, which is why I moved on to other religions like Buddhism. And what stumped me there was like reincarnation or karma, the idea that life would somehow reincarnate. And they use examples here on earth. You could be an animal if you're lesser, you could be whatever, or you could hit higher levels of consciousness. That was a little bit too limited for me too, because being quite well versed in psychedelics, I could see that, and also quantum physics and learning all about that stuff. It just was, there's too many possibilities in reality to just come back to some sort of reincarnation on this plane. You know what I mean? And then the idea of karma too, is that a real thing? So yeah, that led me to a couple other things, which I won't talk about. But how about you? Was there anything that kind of stumped you or failed you in certain religions? And then we can talk about the more refined versions of religion. Like I personally think there's more refined versions. Like, for example, Sufism is an upper echelon of a bunch of, what is it, like Muslim or whatever. And Islamic. Then Islamic, yeah. And then like Vajrayana Buddhism, I would say is like upper echelon of Buddhism. And then I would say Kashmir Shaivism is the highest form of Tantra. So a cool thing about religion is sometimes it can go in a much more refined way. And again, just subjectively speaking, not to say that one is better or worse, but it definitely answered a lot more questions for me the higher it went.
Yes.
Or more refined it got.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of want to draw a little bit from my personal experience here, because I have had tremendous crisis in my life in regards to this question. And it's kind of funny also, you know, I don't know why it became so important to me, but I guess so. When I was about 18 years old, my mom passed away. Okay. So my mom was very sick, and then she passed away. And to me, this was just like this glitch in the matrix. Like, how could this be? Like, I never imagined my mom or my life without my mom. And she was also very young. She was only 39 or 38 years old. And so to me, this sent me into a tremendous abyss of pain and suffering and anger, and even anger towards God. Like, I don't know what form of connection I had with God, but I do remember as a child having this concept of God. And then I just felt so betrayed, so attacked, so, you know, somehow slighted in life. Like, you just ruined my life. And I remember how angry, like I was just basically, I was like, and this is probably interesting, you know, where does this idea of Satan or you know, evil come from? But I really felt this incredible fire of destruction. Like, I don't give a F about anything or anyone anymore. And I just felt like I had this license to be destruction, because, well, after all, you took everything from me that it was so important to me. And so this kind of started me on this dark night of the soul, where I just got deeply, deeply depressed, kind of manically depressed, flicking on and off between like tremendous anger and rage and deep depression. And in this space, through psychedelics, through like just being in nature, and like, you know, I've tried psychedelics in the past before this moment, but somehow in this experience, there was a tremendous opening for me, a tremendous sense of oneness. And suddenly I was able to see I was able to see the perfection of life. I was able to see that, wow, not one hair is out of place, or not like a single accident shouldn't be there. And in that moment, in that like timeless sense of presence that was myself, but at the same time so much greater than myself, I felt this kind of myself turn into a question almost. And the question is exactly what you had, those almost childlike questions of like, who are we? How does this whole world work? What is life really about? Who is God? And instead of in that state, instead of like just some kind of like concepts and ideas, I felt like I lived through this evolutionary unfoldment of consciousness on planet Earth. And I got to experience eons seemingly of time where every pixel is in its perfect place. And I'm like, but what about mom? And in that space, like I felt her presence. I felt like there's no death. Like when that question, it was revealed to me, there's no death. Nobody ever dies. There's no accidents. And I felt her there. And then for some reason, the next moment was like, what about Jesus? And I felt this amazing, beautiful presence. I felt like all of it is true, and again, I don't know but this was my own personal experience. So that was that. And it initiated me into what I would call spirituality, into seeking that experience again, primarily, that communion. But then over time, different practices, etc., I continued to evolve. And then I had this moment of tremendous conflict, because one friend that I dearly trusted and followed and felt like that she was wise and experienced and really just tapped into God. And she went from this space of non-dual realization of God and Advaita and all of this to suddenly click into like orthodox fundamental Christianity. And I was like, which means that everything else is demonic. Hinduism, Buddhism, like all of that, everything in the world is a lie and an attempt to take you off the path, which is the one true path of Jesus. Having that paired, like I had my own experience, which I felt is so true. This oneness, this direct connection, communion with God. And then this challenge of somebody I deeply trusted saying, Boris, you're going in the wrong path. You're going to go to hell. It took me for an amazing contraction. Like I couldn't figure out, I didn't know what the truth was. There was so much turmoil. There's so much self-doubt, so much. And I think that this is a big part of, religion. And religion is kind of like this conformist space where you feel safe in the alignment with everybody else. And as soon as you come out of that alignment, which is what happened to Jesus back in the day, and he got crucified for it, right? And to Buddha too, and all of his teachers also basically shunned him and said, you're going off of the path. You don't understand, So I just so I'm just sharing this experience. There is a deep kind of like inner. It's almost like an oyster with sand in it, and it creates this pearl to prevent the irritation of the sand from hurting it. And I feel like life presents us with these experiences where it's just like creates this irritation, and then we have to find it. Sometimes we feel like we're at the height of spirituality, which is at that time I felt like, oh yeah, I really got the way. And then suddenly, boom. Or we feel like we're at the height of religion, and suddenly it's like, oh, and that's, I think, the grace of life, is because none of the places that we are stopping at and feel like we found our home, there is no home in concepts. There is no home in these time-based, human-based, language-based ways of knowing the ultimate reality.
Yeah, so good. Thank you for sharing that personal story. Yeah. And it's like almost God is like whispering in your ear, remember me? And you're like, yeah, I remember you. He's like, no, you don't. Remember me? He's like making you forget so that you can remember again. It's true. This is really all just wordplay at the end of the day. So it's hard to speak about something so intimate. It's literally the most intimate thing that you can experience, your connection to God, right? It's like this secret that you have with him.
It is a secret. Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, I feel that this is the core of true spirituality, is that it's not anything external. It is like, in the scriptures, they say, lock yourself in your closet, and in secret, speak to your father, and he will reward you openly. Means that he will hear you. He will reveal himself. Right? Because even again in Christianity, we say, like, what is heaven? Like, what is eternal life? And Jesus speaks that it's to know you, Father, the only true God. This is the life eternal. This is the fulfillment. So if we really bring this kind of into a practical, real experience here, that is not just this concept or that, then we say, the only true doorway to this discovery of God is the self, is this very consciousness that we are. It's the one that is hearing right now and speaking, and is being this aliveness. And it's like, it's not where, like, there's also this, was it St. Augustine that said, it's like something like, what you are looking for, it's like, how was it? It's like, what you are looking for is what you are looking with. It's kind of this experience where, like, oh, where is God? And we are actually the, expression, extension, inseparability with God, looking outward and not finding anything, And so let's also maybe introduce this last part to this, not last part, but the path of mysticism, the mystical path that is, we would say Rumi, Jesus, Buddha. These people are mystics. They're not people of religion or spirituality. They're, sometimes we say, so spirituality can be like paganism. There's all kinds of things like, witchcraft. There's all kinds of and there's dark spirituality. And it's like, okay, that is just another subsect of the same duality, right? But mysticism is not looking for any external trappings, but actually is saying the I of my being, I and my Father are one. So the doorway, when Jesus says, I am the way, I am the light, I am the life. He's not saying I, Jesus. He's saying I, the I that I is, the I that I am. That is the only real direction, the only true altar to touch something real, to touch something permanent, right? Because the I of your being and my being has been here the entire time. Has witnessed us from a, zero age to a teenage, through our, every trouble, every experience of our life has been in the context of I. And yet we do not look at this I, we keep on looking outward through the physical eyes. And so the path of mysticism is turning us back inwards and saying, but who is I? What is I? Right?
Yeah. I love the mystics. They always had such I feel like they always let God touch their heart in like the deepest way possible. They surrendered it to them. And then outward from that, they were able to share these amazing things that now affect millions and millions of people. So I'm curious. So if we have a connection to God, let's say we're spiritual or religious, or let's say there's no such thing as spirituality or religion, and we find this connection to God. Do you think as an outpouring of that come morals, ethics, rules, stuff like no sex before marriage, stuff like that, where obviously you feel like it's of the highest thing, and that's what you want to spread in your cult / religion? And then I just want to say, like, the idea of no killing and no this and no that, I think is a very noble cause. And if you were to see an all-loving God, maybe that is something that would be naturally outpouring from that worldview. And then you also have God as this omnipresent thing. So then you have the opposite side of, instead of a very holy, religious, ethically and morally right person, you have the agori from like Hinduism and Tantra, which tried to counter that and say, oh yeah, you want to stay on the side of the good? well, how about God in the side of the bad? So we're going to have sex with dead bodies. We're going to eat humans. We're going to show you that God is omnipresent in your experience. And I know it sounds really weird. Most people maybe haven't heard of this, but I think you will always have that paradox of what is God? Where does God lie? And maybe a natural outpouring is of these rules and ethics and morals.
Yeah. I mean, rules, ethics, and morals are for the unenlightened, right? They are for a world in which God is not imminently present, right? They are a way of, basically, if we say, hey, look, but isn't God the only power? Isn't God the omnipotent, the omnipotent, the omnipresent, the omniscient? Isn't there no second to him? Oh, if there is no second to him, then then where is this, again, like what you mentioned before, where does this evil come from? And what is these rules that we try to create to try to bar it, evil from coming into our experience? Well, so we clearly do not, even though we speak these words, even though, all of the religions honor God as the infinite one. Well, at the same time, we feel that we are somehow apart. He is the infinite one somewhere else, somewhere there, or in the sky, or in a different dimension, but not here. Here, we require a different way to navigate. So I think that all of these different rules are, again, they are a way that the infinite one is meeting everybody at their own level. And so it's like, this one is this one it's, this kind of rule. But ultimately, as we realize our oneness with God, which constitutes our oneness with all spiritual being and idea, then we have a way of navigating life where morals are a natural outpouring. They are so intimate to us, because just like I wouldn't, take my hand and try to hurt this hand with this hand, it's like it wouldn't make sense for us to try to take something, to try to kill, steal, etc. But then beyond this, God is the omniscient. So it is the only intelligence. And then we have this conversation. We could say, like, can we speak to God? Can we get guidance? Can we have instruction? Is my spontaneous action, like the Buddhists say, spontaneous right action? Or what is the way to navigate this, right? And so I feel that, as we had Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield, if you remember, on the Bhagavad Gita saga, and it's like he is being asked to embody principle and to stand for principle and not personality. And in that, he is asked to basically have war against his own family, against his own kin, and to perhaps even kill his, members of his family. And Krishna says, well, this is your play. You are here playing out this karmic thing. So this is your role. And now we come to an even kind of more maybe unacceptable way of looking at life, which is that we are each defined by God, by the infinite, as a specific role, as a specific expression, just as our body, here there's skin cells. It's not a heart cell here. It's not a spleen. It's not a liver. None of that is here. Liver cells go there, and heart's here, and all of that. And if a liver cell says, you know what, I want to be a heart cell, well, now you have some kind of a thing, some kind of disease, some kind of a place where it no longer fulfills its function as what it was designed to be. And so I think perhaps, to me right now, this feels like one of the higher ways of understanding is that what is unfolding is the perfect unfolding of this moment. And it is decreed so to be by the allness of life. And we are here truly to play our part. Sometimes that part may be to be angry. Sometimes that part may be to have gotten into an accident, but we always perceived from our humanhood will say, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And that is, in fact, the fall from heaven. That is, in fact, the fall from oneness, is this belief in two powers, belief in the good and the evil, right? In Christianity, they say they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And suddenly, boom, this world is born, and everything is like either good or bad. And we're trying to play all of this, but we say, hey, wait a minute now. When we're watching a movie, there is seemingly good and bad for the perceiver, but the actors are neither good nor bad. The circumstances are neither good nor bad. They are art. They are expression of creativity, of intelligence, of possibility. And that's all that's unfolding there. We sit here, we judge, but intrinsically in what it is, there is no such thing. And so, I feel that this is where we come to in the end, is we come humbly to accept ourselves right where we are, and being that which we are. We just say, thank you, God. If you want me to be a fish, I'll be a fish. If you want me to be a log, I'll be a log. It doesn't matter to me, because actually I am with you even unto the end of the world. It doesn't matter. I'm always provided for. There's nothing that I need, because there's nothing I can get from here, nothing I can, take with me. So what is it? What is it that you would have me do? And perhaps this is that highest form of spirituality, is deep surrender to the truth. Move me, God, let thy will be expressed through me in all the ways, so that I can be of service in any possible capacity. Use me, call me for it, right? This is, this is kind of the leading emerging edge in me right now.
Beautiful. Damn. All right. Bless you, Boris. That was awesome. We've been going for quite a bit now. Let's end with this question. So do you think that religion is dying? And I'll provide you some information that I was able to find. Not necessarily saying it's a good or a bad thing, but further to that question, I know you're familiar with the term like the Kali Yuga, and the Hindu view of society or cultures moving from separation back into unity, and the Kali Yuga being one of the most difficult times of separation, which feels like what we're experiencing now. So yeah, what are your thoughts on religion dying? Let me share some stats with you before you answer. Actually, what do you think? Do you think religion's increasing or dying?
I think religion is probably evolving. I think that we may. I don't know the stats, but I'm gonna take a guess that people are attending probably less. There may be there may be less support for religion. But on the other hand, when I think about all the fear in the world and our natural human ness trying to join and be together and have some sense of comfort, that makes me think maybe it's actually growing. But I also feel like essentially it is an evolution. And if humanity as a whole is now transitioning from Kali Yuga back towards the golden age, then of course it's like we don't necessarily lose the structures, but I think the structures become something that is appropriate to that level of consciousness. So that's my kind of take on this.
Nice. Interesting. I just had a side thought, which is something that I found fascinating to contemplate, which is here in the West, at least in Canada and the US, we have a separation between church and state, which means that religion is not taught in school. Whereas I learned in many parts of Europe, religion is still taught in school, and it's not just one religion. They actually learn about multiple religions, which is very interesting. The stats I was able to find says that in 2020, 47% of Americans said that they belong to a church, which is down from 70% in 1999. So 2020, 47%, down from 70%. So yes, it seems like, but that's still pretty high. 47% of Americans belong to a church, which is actually quite high in my opinion. Nationwide Catholic memberships increased between blah, blah, blah. It says, okay, here. The number of churches declined by nearly 11%. And by 2019, the number of Catholics decreased by 2 million people. So 2 million people less that were Catholic. It says that most high income countries were becoming less religious. And I had in brackets, is that because they're suffering less? I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe the form of religion is kind of becoming obsolete, the current form, right? And some of these rites and rituals and different things, and maybe people are finding different ways to navigate life that seem to be more useful, more practical, more rewarding than the classical ways. And this is why I think that, I do feel that religion and church is going to emerge as a more spiritualized version of itself in the coming years, where people will still kind of gather, and maybe they will, no longer so much, refer to, ritualistic dogma, but instead begin to maybe talk about this more as, the recognition of God as the omnipresent one, etc. There was a big movement in the United States a while ago, like Christian Science, the whole idea of, using the power of God imminently and presently in our life. But even that is still a concession, because you cannot use God. There's nobody to use God. And so it's another kind of like little form of, illusion, another level. And so I think we will continue to, each individual and as societies and as countries and, even as smaller communities and families, will continue to, over time, climb levels of consciousness towards more and more love and freedom, right? I feel like these are the two, strong qualities of divinity.
Yeah, I would like to see a future. Again, my ideal would be that religion, we just really stop all the labels. So instead of saying I am this person, yes, I am this person, but I can also be this person, like I am Catholic, but I can also be a Muslim. It's no problem. Or say, like, dropping even the spiritual idea and saying, I'm spiritual. I can see chakras and auras, and I believe in the moon, and I believe in a higher power, and even dropping that label and saying, like, because I think the ultimate statement to connect to God has always been one of, like, God is the breath within the breath. God is like that empty, spacious thing that consumes every moment. Everything dies to that silence and that space. So I think at the end of the day, we got to drop the labels. I don't know how that will look in the outward world, but I think we're moving towards that golden age. At least I'd like to believe that. So
I love it. I love this conversation. And I think that maybe in the future, we can kind of spin off of this and really kind of look deeper into this idea of good and evil. Because, we're talking about, religion, spirituality is still kind of a little bit of philosophical. But I think if we really can just sink our, teeth, so to speak, into this idea of good and evil, I think that's even more practical, more close to our experience, more intimate to our everyday life. So perhaps a future episode. So if you guys are enjoying this conversation, please do like and subscribe, and we will continue to pump out this content and really seek out the empowering perspectives, the practical, the applicable perspectives, so that we can actually make a difference in our lives, so that we can actually grow and empower and make a difference, not only, individually, but also just be able to share a message that uplifts people, that, gives them hope and support in this time.
Beautiful. All right, we will end with that. So audience, please breathe it in. Inspiration. We are filled with God. That's the etymology of that. And may you pass it on and share the good word of God, regardless of labels, to everybody around you. So with that being said, God bless. We will see you next week. Take care, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.